On February 25, 1957, in the Fox Chase neighborhood of Philadelphia, the body of a young child was discovered in an illegal dumping ground along Susquehanna Road. The boy was found inside a cardboard box that had once contained a J.C. Penney bassinet. His body had been wrapped in a plaid blanket and placed deliberately in the overgrown lot. The first person to encounter the remains was a young man checking his rabbit traps in the area. Fearing repercussions for the illegal traps, he chose not to report the finding immediately. A day later, a college student happened upon the same scene while investigating a rabbit fleeing into the underbrush. He noticed the box and its contents, but also delayed reporting to authorities until the following day. When police arrived, they discovered the naked body of a small child, estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old. He was approximately 3 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 30 pounds. His hair had been freshly cut, and clumps remained attached to his skin, suggesting the grooming may have occurred after death. His fingernails appeared trimmed, and his body had been washed. The child bore multiple scars, including visible ones on his chin, groin, and left ankle. Some of these indicated previous surgical procedures. Despite the clean appearance, his body showed signs of severe malnourishment and bruising. A coroner later determined that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The area offered no immediate evidence as to the child's identity, and no witnesses came forward to report seeing anything suspicious in the vicinity. The scene marked the beginning of one of Philadelphia's most perplexing unsolved murder cases. Following the discovery of the unidentified child, law enforcement initiated a large-scale investigation to determine his identity and cause of death. The Philadelphia Police Department began by collecting the child's fingerprints and footprint samples, which were then compared against hospital birth records throughout the city and surrounding areas. Despite thorough efforts, no match could be established. The boy had not been reported missing, making the investigation significantly more complex. To widen public awareness, the Philadelphia Inquirer took the extraordinary step of printing and distributing more than 400,000 flyers bearing the boy's image. These were sent to police stations, post offices, courthouses, and residences across the region. The campaign reached homes via utility bills and community posts, aiming to prompt anyone, to come forward with information. Yet, no family member, neighbor, or acquaintance stepped forward to claim the child or provide a lead. In addition to the flyers, investigators released a post-mortem photograph of the boy dressed and positioned in a seated posture. This image, meant to resemble how he might have looked in life, was circulated widely in hopes it would trigger recognition. Alongside this effort, detectives examined several items found near the scene. Among them were a distinctive blue corduroy cap, a child's scarf, and a white men's handkerchief with the letter G embroidered in one corner. Each object was logged and examined, but none led to a breakthrough. Another major lead came from the cardboard box itself. Investigators traced it to a J.C. Penney store in Upper Darby, 15 miles from a crime scene. The box had previously held a bassinet, and the store had sold 12 of them, all purchased in cash. While 8 of the buyers later contacted authorities to confirm they still had their boxes or had discarded them, for purchasers remained unidentified. Despite the promising start, each route, footprints, flyers, forensic objects, and product tracing ultimately led to frustration. The investigation, though meticulous and far-reaching, yielded no concrete answers. The boy remained nameless, and the trail, for now, had grown cold. Despite exhaustive efforts by investigators and wide-scale media attention, the identity of the young boy found in 1957 remained unknown for more than 6 decades. With no birth record, no missing person report, and no family stepping forward, he became known across the country as the boy in a box and America's unknown child. His image circulated through newspapers, bulletin boards, and public service campaigns, yet the child's name continued to elude authorities and the public alike. Interest in the case persisted over time, but the trail remained stagnant. Occasionally, tips and theories surfaced, prompting fresh investigations. Yet each lead dissolved into uncertainty. As years passed, the boy's anonymity became a defining characteristic of the case. Forensic experts revisited the evidence with renewed tools, and in 1998, the child's body was exhumed to extract DNA. The results, while valuable for future comparisons, did not immediately produce a match. In 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a detailed facial reconstruction, hoping it might resonate with someone who once knew him. The boy's grave was moved to Ivy Hill Cemetery, where the community continued to honor him. His resting place bore a headstone engraved with the words "America's Unknown Child," surrounded by toys, flowers, and notes from visitors who never knew him, yet felt compelled to mourn him. Though unidentified, his story endured, etched into the city's history as a mystery that lingered in plain sight, waiting for answers that refused to come. In 2019, more than 6 decades after the unidentified boy was discovered in Philadelphia, investigators obtained a court order to exhume his remains once again. The goal was to retrieve additional DNA for advanced forensic testing using methods unavailable in earlier decades. This effort focused on forensic genetic genealogy, a method that involves analyzing degraded DNA and comparing it to profiles submitted by individuals to public databases. The technique had already shown success in identifying previously unknown victims and solving decades-old crimes. Despite the passage of time and the condition of the remains, a usable DNA sample was extracted. The data was then compared to entries in GEDmatch, a public database used by individuals exploring their ancestry. A crucial breakthrough came when a distant relative, a cousin, had uploaded genetic information to the platform. From this entry, genealogists began tracing familial connections using traditional genealogical methods, narrowing down the possibilities through birth, death, and marriage records. Investigators reached out to the cousin's mother, who agreed to submit her genetic profile. The results allowed authorities to confirm the identity of the child's biological parents. With that confirmation, a court order was obtained to access the boy's original birth certificate. On December 8, 2022, authorities publicly announced that America's unknown child was 4-year-old Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born on January 13, 1953. His parents, Augustus John Zarelli and Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, were both deceased at the time of his identification. However, Joseph had living half-siblings on both sides of his family. The announcement brought partial closure to a case that had long haunted investigators and the public alike. Although his name was finally restored, the circumstances surrounding his death remained unresolved. Law enforcement made it clear that the case was still an active homicide investigation. Authorities declined to release further information about potential suspects, citing the sensitivity of the ongoing inquiry. While forensic genealogy had solved the mystery of the child's identity, it simultaneously opened new questions about what led to Joseph's death. The identification did not mark the end of the case. It marked a pivotal turning point in the search for justice. With a name, Joseph was no longer unknown, but the truth behind his story remained to be uncovered. Before Joseph Augustus Zarelli was identified, investigators, forensic experts, and civilians proposed various theories in an effort to explain who he was and how he died. These theories emerged from genuine attempts to make sense of a child found in such tragic and mysterious circumstances. One widely discussed theory came from forensic artist Frank Bender. Based on the boy's uneven haircut, shaped eyebrows, and the overall condition of his appearance, Bender speculated that Joseph may have been raised as a girl. This hypothesis was visualized through a forensic sketch showing the child with long hair, intended to provoke new public responses. Though the theory was publicized, it yielded no actionable leads and could not be verified. Another theory originated from authors Lou Romano and Jim Hoffman. Through a local informant, they learned of a Philadelphia man who had reportedly sold his son. The authors followed the story and consulted a forensic pathologist who compared photos of the man, his other children, and Joseph. The pathologist noted physical similarities in facial features, ear structure, and nose shape between Joseph and the man's son. A DNA sample was taken from the alleged brother. However, the Philadelphia police did not disclose whether that sample was ever tested or if any definitive match was found. The theory remained inconclusive and unconfirmed. Additional speculation centered on the idea that Joseph may have come from a troubled household or was never officially registered at birth. Some suggested that his appearance, both clean and malnourished, could indicate that he was hidden or isolated, possibly by a family who feared legal consequences or public shame. The circumstances of his post-mortem grooming raised further questions. His recently cut hair, trimmed nails, and cleaned body were inconsistent with neglect, but did not align with any report of care under a medical or child welfare system. The absence of any official missing persons report contributed to the belief that someone intentionally concealed Joseph's existence. Each theory, while distinct in its approach, pointed to a common thread: that Joseph had lived and died in secrecy. Despite the thoughtful analysis and fieldwork that accompanied these ideas, none of them could definitively explain how the boy ended up in a box, alone, and forgotten by name for over 6 decades. Until his identification, theories offered the only semblance of direction, but with each, closure remained out of reach. Among the various theories proposed over the decades, one of the most persistent came from Remington Bristow, an employee of the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office. Bristow dedicated much of his life to the case, believing that the unidentified child may have come from a nearby foster home. Located just 1.5 miles from where the body was discovered, the foster home had drawn early interest during the investigation, but was never formally linked to the crime. In 1960, Bristow consulted a New Jersey psychic in his personal quest for answers. When brought to the site where the body was found, the psychic allegedly directed Bristow to the foster home, stating that it matched her vision. Years later, in 1961, Bristow attended an estate sale at the same residence. While there, he found a bassinet similar to the one sold by J.C. Penney, the same model whose box had been used to conceal Joseph's body. He also noticed blankets on the clothesline resembling the one used to wrap the child. Based on these observations, Bristow developed a theory. The boy had been the illegitimate child of the foster home operator's stepdaughter. According to Bristow, the family may have concealed the boy's death to prevent social shame surrounding unwed motherhood. He speculated that the child had died either accidentally or under undisclosed circumstances and was then abandoned to avoid legal consequences. However, when Philadelphia police later re-examined the home and its residents, all foster children were accounted for. Interviews with the foster family, including the operator and his stepdaughter, who had since married, did not yield any evidence of involvement. Investigators officially ruled out the foster home connection, though Bristow's theory remains a notable part of the case's long history. In 2002, a woman identified only as Martha came forward with a disturbing account that she believed was connected to the unidentified child found in 1957. Her disclosure was made through a psychiatrist in Cincinnati, who contacted Philadelphia investigators on her behalf. Martha claimed that, at the age of 11, she had accompanied her mother to a residence where her mother handed over an envelope in exchange for a young boy. According to Martha, this child was later subjected to physical abuse within their household. Martha alleged that her mother had a long-standing pattern of abuse and intended to inflict similar harm upon the boy. She recounted a specific incident in which her mother attempted to bathe the child and became enraged when he resisted. Martha stated that her mother beat the boy to death during this episode. Following his death, Martha said her mother placed the body in the car and drove to Philadelphia, where it was abandoned in a wooded area. Investigators who met with Martha included retired FBI agents and original case officers familiar with the 1957 crime scene. Among them were Joseph McGillen and William Kelly, who had been present during the initial discovery of the body. These officers, along with other law enforcement professionals, found Martha's timeline, location references, and emotional account to be consistent with known facts of the case. Despite this, her story could not be independently verified. Neighbors from the period denied ever seeing an unfamiliar child at Martha's residence. Furthermore, no physical evidence connected Martha's household to the crime. While investigators acknowledged the internal consistency of her narrative, they could not confirm its authenticity. As a result, Martha's testimony remained a compelling, but ultimately uncorroborated piece of the investigation's complex puzzle. Following his discovery in 1957, the unidentified child was initially buried in a potter's field, a public graveyard reserved for those without names or known family. For decades, his resting place reflected the tragic anonymity that defined his story. Despite the lack of identity, local residents continued to visit the grave, leaving flowers, small toys, and handwritten notes as gestures of remembrance. In 1998, the body was exhumed for DNA testing. Afterward, community members and law enforcement worked together to reinter the child at Ivy Hill Cemetery in the Cedarbrook section of Philadelphia. The cemetery donated the burial plot, and the coffin, gravestone, and funeral service were all provided through community contributions. His new headstone was engraved with the phrase "America's Unknown Child," offering a symbolic name in place of the one he lacked. Over the years, the site became a quiet place of tribute, with citizens continuing to honor the memory of a child they never knew. On January 13, 2023, which would have marked his 70th birthday, a new memorial was unveiled. It featured Joseph Augustus Zarelli's full name and image, finally restoring the identity he had been denied for more than 6 decades. Although Joseph Augustus Zarelli was publicly identified in December 2022, the circumstances surrounding his death remain unresolved. Authorities have classified the case as an open homicide investigation and continue to pursue justice. During the press conference announcing his identity, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw emphasized that naming Joseph marked a beginning, not an end. Investigators acknowledged that the identification provides a foundation, but many questions remain unanswered. Law enforcement has confirmed that Joseph was born in January 1953 and lived beyond the age of 4. He reportedly resided in West Philadelphia near 61st and Market Streets. Investigators believe there are individuals who may have seen or interacted with Joseph during his short life, possibly neighbors, family acquaintances, or community members, who have yet to come forward. Captain Jason Smith of the Homicide Division stated that while detectives have developed suspicions regarding those possibly involved, it would be premature and irresponsible to publicly name anyone at this stage. Both of Joseph's biological parents are now deceased, but he has surviving half-siblings, some of whom were located through DNA matches during the identification process. Police continue to urge anyone with relevant information, regardless of how minor it may seem, to assist in the ongoing investigation. Tips could provide missing context or help verify unresolved leads. While the restoration of Joseph's name brings symbolic closure to one part of his story, the quest to understand how he died and who was responsible remains active. The final chapter has not yet been written,